I've messed this up because my camera was recording in car, so there's no audio, and I'm up here with a couple of likely lads. Here's one, look, that's Richard, and then his lad here, Zach, that's another, and he's just instructing me that I can actually move camera, which I'd forgotten about. But anyway, this silver Range Rover, that's Richard's, and this black full size here, that's Zach's, and of course the Defender in middle, you know, don't you know, that's mine, that's Finn. We've come up Waipora, a buddy of mine, Richard and Zach, and we've come put these three through the paces up in mountains. Well, a bit of the paces anyway. And Richard's just fitted this fancy winch for a job, £10,000 worn, and he's cut bumper and made quite a nice job of it, really. It's just a champion little fit, really, to be honest. This is the sort of thing that I'm thinking about putting into the front of Finn, but of course Finn's got a more complicated front end, hasn't it, with all the bits of sensors and whatever. Anyway, we've come up here just to have a do at just a bit of a light off-road day, really, see how they go on, because Zach's just wanting to get used to his, and Richard's wanting Tet's winch, and we'll find out how we go on with that later on. But anyway, that's about it for now. Let's get going onto the trail and see how we get on. So here's Finn, look at start at trailhead, and you'll just see me crawling over a bit of deep snow there, and I've got it up in raised suspension, obviously, and even with that up, it sort of just crested over top of that snowbank there. It was bashing on my bash plate, as it were. Most of the trail were a bit easier than this, really, or not that this is difficult, but a bit better than this, should I say. You just see me yawping out at window here because I'm trying to tell Richard I can't find out where the wading thing is. Not that I needed it, it's only tyre deep. After that, we moved up to a staging area where we sort of put the three cars side by side, just so we could take some fancy footage with Droney McDroneface, because where we're stood there, it overlooks, as you can see, a really fantastic sort of area, and we go right up, not right into the mountains, but pretty much up there. Now, the three vehicles are pretty evenly matched, really. The Defender, none of them has a rear diff, including the Defender, and they're all running sort of similar tyres. Zach and Richard are both running new Duratrax 275 55 20s and 18s, and I'm running AT3s from Cooper in a 265 60-20, just slightly taller and slightly narrower, so should have been better in this circumstances, really, but actually wasn't. The Duratrax did outperform the AT3s, which was a bit of a setback for me, considering I've been a big proponent of Coopers for such a while. But if we look at this next shot where you'll see a bank and the track's going up a bank, it was actually quite a lot steeper than it looks, but the ones to the left there that go into those trees, those are mine, as the back end slipped out quite badly into the bushes, and the others with the Duratrax just climbed up very nicely. What's worse is they came down very nicely as well, and here you can see sort of Zach just tootling down very controlled, whereas mine slid most of the way down. Sliding down that hill was followed by sliding down the hill you can just see behind Finn right there on the back, and this is the first bit that we hit in the river bottom, where we tried to climb up a bit of a rocky bank, and again it looks easier than it actually was, but both of us got stuck there twice, and Defender got stuck because the power kept being pulled away from me as we tried to climb the bank, which was a very odd sensation. You'll see that in this next clip. Why is this not, what do we want? Sand mode, sand. Right, okay, sand mode, DSC off, third gear, low range. Taking the power again. Took it off me. Took the power off me. I had the foot same position on the throttle. I did nothing. It just took the power. Oh, it'll go up with speed. I just don't want to. I wanted it to go nicely. Emergency braking not available. Yeah. Think it needs a bit more speed, doesn't it? That was sand mode, and it didn't take the power then. So we're going to try now, what are we going to try? Low second, steady as you go. And let's see how, we're in mud and ruts here, let's see how this goes up.
Or doesn't. Your wheels are spinning on your computer.
There's not a lot happening there.
You're burning. Stop.
I'm trying.
Tires.
You think?
Don't try, all four wheels are spinning. So first gear, low range, mud ruts, gear CO. Hang on, it just decided it wanted a different gear. Whoa!
See, it's doing my trick.
Now you back up, you need to start again. I'll just do it with some actual revs this time.
It doesn't like going up slowly, does it? My Range Rover class it to the crawled up there.
It was alright till it took gear off.
Yeah. Oh, right, yeah, we're.
And do the same again, just a little bit more actual in revs.
More controlled than Defender, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You can see that Zach's Range Rover is a little less composed on its way up, but it nevertheless succeeds in getting up, and in fact it did so twice better than the Defender did, which sort of got stuck really halfway along.
Yeah, it's not all about that, we're running out of road.
Yeah, I think you're out. There's a river.
Well, it's only a river, isn't it? Get in it.
Don't be funny.
Few people gone up the river, we can't get across here, but maybe we can get in and then across further up like we did last time.
Well, yeah, I'm a bit lost here somewhere, because when we came through here last time we could sort of get across, but is it covered in snow? Is that the problem? Snowbank?
If you look across, you can see the orange square that we have to get to. So we have to sort of get into the river and then get out of it at the other end. I'm not sure how we get out of it, that's the problem.
Well, you see that gravel bit to the right, that's the place, isn't it? I would say there, where that's the gravel's popped through the snow, you get up there, some tyre tracks already.
It's not open.
Alright.
It's a big rock. Oh my god. You're not going in a river.
Yeah. Only a river. Yeah, that looks alright, it's not deep there.
You guys are nuts.
We ended up down here now by this bit of a river crossing, and I managed to get Droney McDrone face up so we could get some film footage of going through here, but we had a bit of a catastrophe when I crossed and bumped over a rock, and Taryn dropped the controller and shut off the camera, so we only got the going in bit and not the coming out bit, which was actually more fun, but doesn't seem to have found any oil. There it is, look, it's a little blue thing.
Weight sensor works!
When we get to the other side, and you'll see that in a minute, we did have a bit more of a drama to sort of deal with, but we'll show you some footage about that, because we all got stuck in a big hurry, and that's one of my concerns about playing on your own, is that you've got no support. You can see Rich there, look, with his fancy handheld camera. He's got one of those dead squirrels or whatever they call them that goes around microphone. I think I should get me one of those things, but I've only really got an iPhone. I do all my recording through iPhone and drone, and I'm not made away with money, so I'm not buying fancy tackle if I can help it. So most of the ground is like this. It's this hard, compacted sort of rocky, gravelly stuff, and a bit of sort of snow, which you can see is quite hard, it's crusty. But the Defender does have this does have this habit of revving a lot. The pedal's not light. It's not that the gas pedal, the throttle pedal's light. It's more that the engine gearing's very, I don't know, it's very low geared or something, and the slightest bit of acceleration will have the engine quite high revving, you know, and it's a bit awkward when you try and drive around because there's too much rev and not enough sort of controlled movement. Now, I swung camera around quite quickly because I wanted to see and catch Zach just dropping into water. There's not very much of it, but it was very pretty. But by that time, he'd already sort of got most of the way through. Now, this little bit here where Zach sort of stops, there's two pieces of two sort of trails that we could get through. Both of them had a little bit of snow in it, not very much snow, and this is something that I've kind of complained about before, and I do mention it in a video that I've got upcoming regarding just tootling about, really trying to find a balloon, but that's another story altogether. But nevertheless, I mentioned the fact that the L322 and the LR3 and the Defender, they all seem a bit ungainly on snow, and they seem like they're too heavy and cumbersome. They seem like they just sort of go into it and just disappear. They don't, like my Range Rover Classic, could nimbly sort of navigate over the top of things and was a much more confidence building sort of experience. But you'll see here in this next video that piece to the right is where Zach and I try to go, and then Richard tries to go sort of in front of him around, and all three of us get stuck several times. Anyway, look at the shape of the bonnets here. Very, very similar. Look, the outline and the shape of the front and the window curve and the rest of it. Now, in this shot here, you see, this droney shot, I've just moved Droney McDroneface to catch this, but you can see Zach's got himself buried here right up to his sort of axles in that snow, and I'm going to yank him out as best I can with this kinetic strap thing that he's that he's got. It's my first time I've ever used a kinetic strap, being sort of old school, but you can see what I've done here is I've tried the old school manoeuvre, which is a long strap and some terrain and then pulling him back, but you can see that the success that we had there was non-existent. This is part of the difficulty with the tyres that I've noticed, is the fact that these AT3s actually are very, very poor on snow and ice, and really aren't very really don't have a lot of traction. And here you can see I'm spinning any which way you like, and Zach's still sat in the hole. I tried a number of different TRS modes. This one here is actually just rock crawl and DSC off. And this next snatch gets him right out. So Zach manages to get out, and when we unhook, I have a bit of a go going into the hole, and well, you'll see in a minute that the result of that isn't very good. So while Zach and I were packing the shackles away and tidying up, Richard was attempting to play with his new toy, and he'd got his winch in full repose, as it were. So he'd fastened this to a tree about 30 yards off, and he was attempting to sort of winch himself out and give a little bit of wheel support from being in drive, obviously, as you do. And you can see that the winch is doing a cracking job, really, but these ruts are very, very deep here, and you'll see in a minute as this lurches forward just how deep that front spoiler is wedged into the snow, as it sort of tears a fairly large chunk of snow out with it. And there you go, see. And so he's probably in that bumper, I bet he's probably 6 or 8 inches below the sort of line of the spoiler. But you can see that the rope here, the photograph taken by Droney McDroneface, thank you very kindly for remote assistance. You'll see that see me get out of the way here a minute because I hadn't seen those cars coming. You'll also see that he'd fastened that tree saver around, and he'd put the weight strap over the winch rope, but you don't really need one because the winch rope's nylon, so it doesn't really need that support. If it breaks, it just sort of bounces about a foot and then drops on the floor. But those are recommended practice with a steel rope for sure. Anyway, his new £10,000 winch is really doing a cracking job here. As you can see, it's pulling the car straight out of the ruts and sort of, or straight across the ruts sort of thing, really, as it pulls him forwards. But you can see where it's buried in the middle there, on presumably something underneath the gearbox. but he suddenly gets a bit more traction and then can free himself with, with his under his own power sort of thing. I decided to give it the beans here after Zach's failed attempt, so I engaged third low and rock crawl mode to tighten everything up, and then I give it some. But as you'll notice, as soon as I set off pretty much, I slide sideways into Zach's old ruts and then dropped right into where his wheel ruts were, and no forward momentum is had from this point onwards. This pause here is me circling through the low traction launch. Apply accelerator pedal until vehicle moves away.
It doesn't say which way though.
No, it doesn't, does it?
Away.
Not a lot of moving happening so far.
I think it's going to be the backwards way. No, you're...
In the end, I eventually tried to give it some in sand to see if I can't spin it forwards and waddle the steering to sort of pull some fresh holes, and here's that happening while I spin forwards. And you can see that both wheels at the front are spinning, as are the ones at the back, but there's a lack of traction. Now, Zach's wheels are about an inch shorter than mine overall, and so I do have a benefit of a touch of height here, but I am sat bellied out, and there's no extended height to be got, so I wasn't able to raise the suspension at all. Followed the instructions, and all it said was re-engage high, off-road height, and that was kind of it. And then I had to be unceremoniously towed out by Richard Sport, having freed himself with his own winch. Now, those of you with keen eyes will notice that my wheels are still turning here. I put it in sand mode, and one of the interesting things I noticed after giving it some beans was that it wouldn't stop. I put my foot on the brake and it kept wanting to creep further forward somehow, and I couldn't stop the wheels. There you are. He should have. Zach, I fell into your holes, which was part of the issue, I think. But
I mean, I was going really, really slow.
You were, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, I did the same. You just like, it's only like 6 inches deep.
How deep are they? You should have taken a photograph, really. Knee height.
Yeah,
Knee height.
fully shot.
Now, after that unceremonious evacuation, Zach managed to get through without difficulty and really showed the defender up in that bit of deep snow. From here, we just sort of jingled up the trail right up to the top here, and right at the very end of the trail is a sort of a frozen waterfall, but you can't get that far in the spring because they close the trail to eliminate damaging, in the summer when it's less frozen. But I had at this point set my configurable TRS to a setting that I wanted to use in this trail.
30-40 years of playing in Range Rover classes. I remember when we went out with Freedom.
Continue, first select configurable. Oh, right, I see, I've got to do that, have I? Right, configurable. Through pressing this button here, and then all the way to the end. And then mountain trail, automatic, lock center. Oh, I see. So I can physically lock the center. Powertrain relaxed, normal, responsive. So that's what. Yeah, I'm going to. So there is one here. I'm just going to set it up, and I'll tell you what I've done.
Alright.
Stop to do it.
No. Relaxed. Lock center. Steering light traction.
You want steering medium or light?
Medium.
Oh.
And I'm going to rename this. Rename. and in doing so I had locked the central diff for most of this path because the tyres were slipping, and of course I didn't have a lot of purchase, as you can see. But I did notice something very interesting. You know, it's funny, but I can hear that central diff being locked. It's got a different noise to it now. It's much lower on the RPM. It's only kicking at about 1200 RPM in automatic in this custom all-terrain, whatever it is. But I can hear that diff. I can hear it sort of yeah, like a whine, like a light buzz. I don't know whether it's a good idea to keep it in all the time on this. I don't know how tight it needs to be. It shouldn't be so bad. There's plenty to spin out on, isn't there?
We don't go slippery anyway. What we're driving on slippery, so you should be alright.
On the way back, we just sort of jingled on and bothered none, really, as they say back home. And we sort of cruised through this very pretty scenery along this sort of messy old riverbed here, and I'm not quite sure what the story is with it, why it's so wide, because that little river, as you can see, can't have caused all of this. But anyway, there'd been a big fire this year, at some stage, or perhaps last year, and you can see on that hill on the left-hand side, when I last went through here, it was all treed like it is in the bottom and on the right, but you can see on the left it's gone a bit bald. Anyway, we jingled on here, carried on a bit until we came to an hill that we wanted to play on, and we knew that there'd been some rain. Well, you can see it's been rainy, actually, been snowing, but you can see that it sort of made the ground a bit wet on the top, and that hill is sort of soily, and we wanted to just try it on some slippy, greasy mud and see how the three compared, really, and the results were actually quite surprising. Now that situation occurred on the second attempt. This is the first attempt, and as I progress up the hill you can see that actually it goes up relatively well, but I was going a little faster than what I would have preferred. It doesn't look very fast, but it sort of was, and I wanted to try to go up a little bit more progressively and a little bit more slowly and a little bit more under control. Now remember that what had happened in the past was that when I'd started to climb banks, the power was being taken from me, and it happened there again. This is just me having a conflab with Zach and Richard saying exactly the same thing. Did you notice the power had been cut? Yeah, I did, actually, funnily enough. And so we then tried a different attack, and so we tried to go up, or at least Zach tried to go up in a more controlled and sort of steady manner.
Just a second. He's trying to go as slow as possible.
See, he can keep a steady throttle control. I can't do that because it takes it from me.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny just how slippy it can be, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you spun a lot, so you sort of taken all that meat off the beginning. So.
Foot drops, DSC off, second gear low range.
By this time, we'd been up and down a time or two, and we'd polished the surfaces a bit, really, and all the loose stuff had sort of come out, and we were struggling for grip. My AT3s weren't doing anybody any favours whatsoever, and even the Duratracks were struggling a bit. Go on then!
I'm just first gear low range, same as I've done before.
Right, yeah.
I'll give it one and then I'll come back and do it properly.
Okay. Digging better holes than...
That. I was going to be really pissed if he got...
Well, he got a bit further than you did, but he's digging better holes.
Yeah. Quite the machine is that.
Yeah.
wind's getting cold, isn't it?
It is, I was just thinking that. It's very pretty out here, Richard.
Good, get up.
Second gear, doing it properly.
That'll do, won't it? And there you are, what a cracking day we had. I mean, it was lovely weather, it was grand scenery, and we got good pals there and some of Solihull's finest, so I mean, how can you not have a good day? I was thinking as I was making this video and on the way back, that really the Defender didn't actually impress me very much in terms of its ability and comparison to older Range Rovers. I mean, the full fat and the half fat are both 3 series, so they're 3 generations older than the Defender, and the Defender really should perform better with good tyres or not good tyres. On the tyre front, my Defender's tyres, the Cooper AT3s, they are a little bit more worn. They've certainly got 15,000 miles on them, and both Zach and Richards were nearly new, really. But mine had got 12-30 seconds of tread on them, and theirs had 14-30 seconds, so not that much difference in terms of tread depth. Certainly not enough that would make the differences that we saw in these videos. The biggest issue, I think, is this pulling of power, and I don't know where that comes from. It seems to be a gearbox thing, not a power thing, because the DSC's off and you get the sensation that the engine is wanting to go, but there's something stopping it. I don't know whether it wants to try and shift gears or thinks it should be shifting gears and isn't shifting gears, but whatever it is that's happening, it really impedes forward direction sort of significantly, and you could hear in a couple of the clips there, you could hear the power just disappearing, and so you overcompensate because you know the power's being cut, so you do try to give it a bit more gas, but then of course it decides that it's got your momentum has slowed and now it wants to change gear because you need more gas, and it's doing some thinking, and that thinking is slowing you down and it's stalling you. And a number of times when I climbed the banks, I noticed that was a significant problem, and that actually generated the inability to climb the bank. Now, I know that we could have climbed them faster, and I know that there's a lot of people saying, well, you know, if you'd have hit it faster or you'd have hit it in third gear, all these sorts of things, away you go. And those things are quite valid, and it was clear that a little bit more momentum would have got you up many of the difficult surfaces. But the point is, the Defender should be able to keep up with the Range Rovers that were doing it much more controlled and much more sedately, shall we say, without massive amounts of power or without massive amounts of sort of throttle openings. And they didn't have the difficulty shifting gears. Now, both of those vehicles have the 6-speed, and the Defender has the 8-speed. Now, I haven't taken an 8-speed off-road before, and I do wonder whether or not there's too many gears. And again, I'm going to go back to that issue between third and second gear being an awkward split that generates gaps and confusion, and I think that's noticeable in low range as well, because of course second and third gears are your primary pulling gears in low range, and I think that awkward gap there is part of the difficulty that we're seeing, and I think that is part of the loss of power that we're noticing as it's trying to shift between second and third, or you know, whatever it thinks it needs to be in. It was disappointing to note that the AT3s, which I'd always sort of considered better than the Duratrack, are actually much less good in this snowy circumstance. With these sheer drops and sort of shiny ice, the Duratracks in this size had considerably more grip. Now, my experience with Duratracks was with the 255/55 19s for the LR3, and oddly enough that was the only size that was not available in a 3-peak mountain snowflake rating. So I'm wondering whether that 19 that I tried was actually a different kind of tyre and a different kind of compound, and of course that would have jaded my experience in its winter performance, because of course it had less because it didn't make that 3-peak mountain snowflake rating. Richard and Zach both had 275/55 well, 275 profile tyres on anyway, and that had, I would have thought, reduced their ability in the snow and ice, but actually their performance was better than the AT3 quite considerably. Whether that had anything to do with my ability or inability to climb the gravel banks, I can't say, because you would have expected that it would have performed just as well in mud and just as well in the gravel, because it does have these big chunky sidewalls and it does have these lugs on the side to grab at the gravel, but oddly enough that's not the case. And where the Range Rovers, both of the Range Rovers, manipulated themselves up the back with a little less composure, nevertheless they did so 4 times out of 4, whereas the Defender only did it 2 times out of the 4. In fact, this hill that you can see in front of you that the Land Rover sort of sat on for the photo opportunity, I struggled to get up that 6 times, managing 2 out of the 6 times, whereas Richard only failed once and so did Zach. So, and they ran after me as well, so it can't be just to the polishing of the mud. There's something else going on. And to be frank, I'm actually quite disappointed with the way that the Defender performed given these circumstances, because with this new generation of technology you really would expect the Defender to have performed better. And so there we are, the video that has a conclusion when it wasn't in search of one. It wasn't really intended to be, this video, a sort of a an underlining of how the Defender performs off-road, but it was meant to sort of guide a real-world experiences. So this is a Canadian Defender operating in very Canadian circumstances: slippy ice, some snow, lots of gravel, bald grass, and so on and so forth. And it does appear that the Defender didn't perform as well as the Range Rovers. Now, a lot of that could be down to the tyres. So you can see here, this is the hill descent control is engaged. Hill descent control is engaged up there, look, and I've set the speed on here to very slow, and I'm just going to descend, but I've just come down a bit of a bank just up the way, and Richard went down with his Duratrax, which was significantly less slippy than my AT3s. So interestingly, just while I'm trying to record, interestingly, AT3s, I'm not that impressed with them now. I'm happy to accept that the AT3s now aren't as good as the Duratrax in terms of biting into the ground and getting fresh purchase. That much is evident, and it is nice to see that the traction control, is allowing all 4 wheels to get going, which is one of the criticisms of vehicles that don't have lockers. How can all 4 wheels be turning? Well, they do, and here's the evidence. And so really, where the Range Rover had more purchase, probably because the Duratrax were digging into the bank a bit better, the AT3 was sort of skipping around on the surface, and I think a lot of the tractional issues were down to that. But that doesn't explain why the AT3s were digging big holes in the snow, and Zach's Duratrax on the Range Rover just bounced, got purchase and went over the top of it. It is funny that the Defender just sat there and dug holes, and it wasn't through trying a couple of times. We did have a couple of bashes at it, and Zach's Range Rover was the one that cut the trail, and the Defender was the one that got sat there twice. So that's interesting in terms of its ability to keep forward momentum in those sorts of real world snowy conditions, and that's the primary concern I have for driving the Defender. Anyway, that's about all we've got time for today, so I suppose it's good night from me and it's good night from Finn. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Cheerio.